that's a summary of the second chapter. I think you can find that summary in the introduction of the book. They give a summary of each of the chapters. Okay, first verse. Sanjaya said, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudan Krishna spoke the following words. So the first verse of the second chapter spoken by Sanjaya. Sanjaya is of course talking to Dhritarashtra. They're not on the battlefield. So Prabhupada comments on this word Madhusudana. The word Madhusudana is significant in this verse. Lord Krishna killed the demon Madhu, and now Arjuna wanted Krishna to kill the demon of misunderstanding that had overtaken him in the discharge of his duty. So addressing Lord Krishna as Madhusudana, this is done by Sanjaya. Or we could say this is Vyasa's description, not exactly Sanjaya's words. But Vyasa, of course, he knows the identity of Lord Krishna. Therefore, he could address him as Madhusudan. So from Prabhupada's purport of this first verse, Prabhupada is speaking about compassion, comparing real and false compassion. Compassion for the dress of a drowning man is senseless. You can see in the illustration the man in the boat. He saved the jacket and the poor man is drowning. The man in the boat, he's happy, I saved the jacket. But the man is drowning. And so Prabhupada gave this example about material welfare work. He compared it like this, that we're often engaged in welfare activities which is simply beneficial for the body. So it's not actually compassion, it's actually misdirected compassion. Prabhupada comments, a man fallen in the ocean of nescience cannot be saved simply by rescuing his outward dress, the gross material body. One who does not know this and laments for the outward dress is called a Sudra, or one who laments unnecessarily. So that kind of compassion. I remember there was a concert, there was a big concert held in New York. George Harrison, at that time, he'd been expressing a lot of interest in Krishna consciousness. And George Harrison had organized a big concert. It was held in the Madison Square Gardens there in New York City. And the idea was to raise money for Bangladesh. It was at the time when Bangladesh was separated from Pakistan. You know, after the partition, Bangladesh and Pakistan were one government, but then Bangladesh and Pakistan separated. So Bangladesh had no money, and George Harrison was helping them raise money. He organized this concert. Prabhupada said, this is like putting oil on the hair. He said, there's already so much oil on the hair, and you want to put more on the hair. What's the good? He said, useless. So Prabhupada gave these different kinds of examples to explain false compassion, which is so prominent in the material world. Compassion based on the body is not actually compassion. Okay, going ahead, second verse. Lord Krishna is speaking now. Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupashtitam anarya justam aswargyam akirti karam Arjuna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy." Confirmed by the clouds. All right, so Lord Krishna is giving strong words to Arjuna. He is not very pleased with Arjuna. How have these impurities come upon you? They are not befitting a man, right? They're anarya justam. They're not befitting an Arya, someone who knows, an Aryan. An Arya is one who knows the values of life, but somebody who doesn't know the value of life is anarya. And Lord Krishna said, you're going to go to infamy. You won't go to higher planets, you'll go to some disgraceful place. So Krishna chastises Arjuna in these two verses, number 2 and number 3. Krishna is really chastising Arjuna. He uses these words, kuta. In the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Arjuna's lamentation for his kinsman is certainly unbecoming, and therefore Krishna expressed his surprise with the word kuta, where from? And then anarya justam, not befitting an Aryan. The word Aryan is applicable to a person who knows the value of life and have a civilization based on spiritual realization. Right? Sometimes the people talk about the Aryan invasion, but the real Aryans were there already. The people who lived there in India, they were the real Aryans. It wasn't that the Aryans came from Europe. The Europeans, they were the uncivilized people. The Aryans were the people who really lived there. So Prabhupada says, the word Aryan means one who knows the value of life. They have a civilization based on spiritual realization. So this term Aryan is often misused. Then Aswargyam. Arjuna's impurities will not lead him to Swagaloka. So Swagaloka, heaven. Materialistic people, they often desire to go to heaven, to enjoy the opulence and the facilities of heaven. Long life, and intelligence, and bodily beauty, everything is there in the heavenly planets. But, of course, we know that it's also temporary. You cannot remain there in Swagaloka. Later on, Lord Krishna will describe from the highest planet down to the lowest, all are places of misery. Anyway, just now, Krishna is speaking that your impurities, Arjuna, will not allow you to go to higher planets. Akirti karam, such a behavior will only cause him infamy. Oh, you're going to lose your good name and reputation. You behave like this, it's not going to do you any good. So Krishna is really speaking strongly to Arjuna, and we'll see it has a good effect on Arjuna. Vishame, in such a critical situation, with so many depending on you, how do you manifest such impurities? Kashmalam. The impurities. So here we are in the middle of the battlefield, and you're speaking like this. It's a very critical situation. And so many are depending on Arjuna. Certainly he's a very key player in the battle of Kurukshetra. As Krishna says, so many are depending on you. How can you show these impurities? What a time to come out with all of these impurities. Okay? So here we see Arjuna kneeling at the feet of Lord Krishna. Srila Prabhupada explains, he was thinking that by showing that compassion, he'll be eulogized by Krishna. But Krishna condemned it, just the opposite. In other words, Krishna is very strict also. That is the qualification of Krishna and his associates. Vajrad api kotara and kushumad api komala. Softer than a flower and harder than a thunderbolt. So Krishna is not lenient to his friend or to his devotee, because that leniency will not help the devotee. All right? Do you remember hearing this example? Softer than a flower, harder than a thunderbolt. When was it? Who was here? Lord Krishna is being described in his dealings with Arjuna. Can you think of some more examples where this softer than a flower and harder than a thunderbolt comes over? Yes? Hare Krishna? Who else? When did you hear this example? Who is it used by? When?
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu?
Yes. When?
When he chastised his servant, when he was looking at being a sannyasi, he was looking at a woman. He asked him to leave, right? I forgot his name.
Junior Haridas.
Junior Haridas. Chota Haridas, yes.
Right. Right. What happened? They put him out from his association, right? He said, cannot come to me. Cannot come in my presence again. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could be like a thunderbolt. And how, in what way was he softer than a flower? Anybody? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could be very strict, and he could also be very kind also.
Maharaj, he accepted.
Yes? What happened?
Maharaj,
Yes, go ahead, Mataji.
Maharaj, he accepted everybody no matter what, like, and he, like, for example, even the Mayavadi, like Prakashanand Saraswati Sarvabhaum, he was very kind to them and even accepted them. Also forgave the Chand Kazi, like, after a lot of discussion. So, in that terms, he was softer with his devotees.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Dukhi Maharaj, Dukhi, in the Mahaprakash Leela, Dukhi who was bringing that...
Oh, the lady, yeah, the maidservant
Yes, yes.
in the home of Srivas Thakur was bringing the
Yes,
water
yes.
from the Ganga. And what did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu do?
He gave her pure bhakti and she was chanting, and she was then called Sukhi. She was before called Dukhi.
Right.
Then she's...
Yes, changed the name from Dukhi to Sukhi. And also another example was when Shivananda Sen's wife was carrying a baby. Then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very pleased. And he said also, he said, when the child is born, you should call the child, give the child the name Puri, Puri Das. Right? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not against people in family life. On one hand, he was very strict with sannyasis, but he was not against people in family life, having a family and having children. Rather, he would congratulate them. Very nice, you're bringing a child into the world. And he gave the name for the child. And there are many pastimes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with the children of devotees. So in this way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was showing himself to be softer than a flower, and at the same time, sometimes harder than a thunderbolt. All right? Any other examples?
Maharaj, how about Srila Prabhupada?
Okay, can you give me the pastimes?
Pastimes, I'm not sure, but Srila Prabhupada is always strict with his sadhana, and is very strict with his devotees, but with disciples. But when it comes to compassion, Srila Prabhupada is very, very compassionate person.
Yeah. Yes, certainly. Prabhupada would be quite strict sometimes with the sannyasis. He would tell them, have to conquer oversleeping. If they slept too much, Prabhupada would complain. He said, sannyas is not meant for eating and sleeping. You have to conquer over eating and sleeping. The mood of the Goswamis. So in that way, Prabhupada was quite strict. And at the same time, Prabhupada could be very merciful. If he saw devotees with some kind of infection or poor health, Prabhupada would give them some advice, what to do, how to treat the problem. Sometimes he would give them, if they were lacking cloth, sometimes he would give them cloth so they could keep warm in the winter. Things like this. Lord Nichananda also could get very angry. Right? What's the example? When Lord Nichananda got angry? Someone? Yes, somebody like to tell me? Lord Nichananda, you remember when he got quite angry? You know, if there's a lot of background noise here, it's good you turn off your microphone because it's quite distracting to hear people in the background doing things. Thank you. So Lord Nichananda, he was traveling with the devotees to go to Jagannath Puri, and he had to wait one day. They were waiting under a tree. They had to wait while Shivananda Sen dealt with the officials at the border, and he was paying taxes and arranging papers, and it took some time. So Lord Nichananda got quite angry, and Lord Nichananda cursed the sons of Shivananda Sen to die. And when Shivananda Sen came, Lord Nichananda kicked him. So Lord Nichananda could, sometimes like a thunderbolt. And even when Lord Nichananda, when Shivananda Sen came, then he found his wife was crying, and he asked her what's wrong, and she said, Lord Nichananda has cursed our sons to die. And Shivananda Sen replied that if Lord Nichananda wants our sons to die, let them die. And when Lord Nichananda kicked him, and then Shivananda Sen thanked Lord Nichananda and said, today I'm blessed to have the dust of your lotus feet on my body. So, Lord Nichananda was like a thunderbolt, but Lord Nichananda could also be very, very kind, also like a flower. We know that when Jagai and Madhai attacked him, right? That it was Lord Nichananda who pleaded on behalf of Jagai and Madhai that in this age must be merciful. All right, so this is the nature of a devotee. Here Prabhupada is talking, Krishna is very strict. Krishna is not lenient to his friend or to his devotee, because that leniency will not help the devotee. Right? The real mercy is the strictness. And Prabhupada found his own spiritual master very strict. Right? Do you remember the pastime? Prabhupada got the mercy of his spiritual master.
Maharaj, was it the time when Prabhupada was translating for an old man who couldn't hear properly, and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj chastised him, saying, "Don't talk in my lecture." Like.
Yeah, but Prabhupada was not translating for the old man. They were both listening to the lecture. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was lecturing, and the old man was sitting behind, and he touched Prabhupada on the shoulder, so Prabhupada turned around to look at him to see what he wanted. And immediately Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati stopped talking, and he addressed the two of them, because it's an offense to talk when the Acharya is speaking. It's an offense to talk something else. So he immediately chastised the two of them, and he said to the old man, he said, "Do you think you have purchased me because you did give a donation of a few rupees every month?" And then he said to our beloved Srila Prabhupada, he said, "Do you want to come up here and talk?" And Prabhupada said it was the moment of greatest mercy. He said, "I could have died on the spot." But he said it was actually the greatest mercy. So that strictness of the Acharya, that is what helps the devotee, makes us more serious and more conscious. If we let the things go without any comment, then it's not mercy. So, okay, we'll continue here. So this sort of strictness from God on the devotee is sometimes misunderstood, because we are always accustomed to accept what is immediately very pleasing. But we should not be